but clearly this is some like peculiar activity and likely some whale games happening here where somebody could know something, right? Like when you see these types of moves, it's definitely be somebody who has some sort of inside scoop or has some alpha.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of WagmiTV. We have a really fun one for you guys today. We are talking strict alpha on the GameStop GME token on Solana, not to be confused with the GME stock, but we will talk about how that kind of plays into the narrative here. This is one we covered actually 10 months ago. And to any lucky listeners at that point that actually bought at that time, you guys would have been up 30, 40, 50x, depending on, when you exited. But neither here nor there. We're here to cover that again. We're seeing some interesting things from the fundamental perspective and the chart perspective. So once again, this is not financial advice, but we're going to dive into a couple of interesting things from whale activity to the chart analysis as well. So without further ado, Zoe, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Sia. Great intro. Yeah, for any of the early subs of this channel that actually watched our first GME video, congrats to you guys. If anybody got in there, that was quite the run. We want to cover it again today. We're circling back on it because we are seeing some interesting stuff going on with the stock. Now, if you guys, obviously everyone is familiar with the GameStop story with Roaring Kitty back in 2021, and the whole saga that went on there. There's been tons of stories about it, documentaries, Netflix shows, you name it. And earlier this year, he actually came back and started tweeting again, and that sent the stock on an absolute crazy frenzy. And so, kind of what we're seeing is a little bit of interesting activity. And you combine that with the chart that we're going to get into, and you kind of start to see like there might be something cooking here. And if there is, the risk reward right now is pretty favorable. So the first thing that happened was about 10 days ago, our man Roaring Kitty, he's notorious for these like weird cryptic kind of tweets that he puts out. And on December 5th, he just put this out. Now, obviously, no one knows what this means. The stock kind of like, I think there's algorithms that are basically monitoring his Twitter. So like the moment he puts out a tweet, like the algorithms just bid. So, you had a spike in the stock, but didn't really catch a lot of news. Nothing too crazy, but obviously like, just him re-entering the game is noteworthy. I wouldn't call it like seriously important at all times, but it is noteworthy. Now, you combine that with this second piece of information, and this actually just happened earlier today, right? I'll share this tweet. And what's really interesting here is that you basically had at the end of today, at the closing, right before the market was closing, somebody came in with $3 million of buys on way out of the money call options. Okay. So if you check out this chart, you can see the premium spiking right here at the end of the day, like tons of call volume. And there are other tweets that kind of detail this trade, but at the end of the day, it's $3 million coming in on a call option that is 5x out of the money. The current stock is trading at like $25 to $30. So at $125 strike calls and only 1 month out for the expiry, that would mean that somebody is betting that GME stock is going to at least 5x in the next 30 days, basically. So, take it as you will, but clearly this is some like peculiar activity and likely some whale games happening here where somebody could know something, right? Like when you see these types of moves, it's definitely, not the end all be all. Maybe it's just some degenerate gambler. It totally could be, but it also could be somebody who has some sort of inside scoop or has some alpha. So all this combined, makes us think that it could kind of be an interesting time to start looking at the meme coin. And so let's go over to the chart, and that'll show you a little bit more about the risk reward scenario that we see playing out.
Yeah, definitely. Let me pull it up for us here. So again, this is GME Coin on Solana. So it's the meme coin, not the GME stock. It kind of follows fairly similarly to what the GME stock does from a general perspective. Obviously, when we reported on it before, it hadn't caught much wind, and then everybody was in it. I think a big thing about this is obviously we know Robinhood, we know the whole story that happened with Citadel and them pausing people from being able to sell, all that sort of thing, right? And so obviously you can't put those regulations and do those sorts of things on crypto, right? So I think that's the big thesis behind GME as a coin, because if this thing does run crazy, like some people are obviously betting on, obviously, you'd be able to get out, right? I think that's a big thing for a lot of these folks. But as we look at this, there's a couple things that I want to draw our attention to. So this orange trend line, kind of a downtrend here. It's from this massive spike that we had back in June 7th of 2024. This is a daily chart, so all these candles are different days. It's coming down through the spike we had in November. And then, funny enough, that's this December 5th date where Roaring Kitty actually tweeted. We saw a massive move up. It was, let's see, from the bottom to the peak, about 100% move, 95%, which is pretty crazy to see. But what we did see is it actually came back down and closed below this line, right? So it wasn't confirming above that. Obviously, we knew we weren't going to continue to keep pushing up on that. What we saw in the days moving after that is we kind of just started to, we popped up above it and just are kind of hanging on this line, right? Generally speaking, what we're looking for is a really, really heavy bounce off of this line. What we're also coming into is some really decent support between 004 and just about 005, right? So pretty interesting area, right? You have 2 points of confluence where you have this downtrending line where we're bouncing off of it. You have this support zone that we're coming into. Obviously, the first line of resistance is going to be this 009-ish area where we pumped up to on the 17th of November. But then after that, right, you have some pretty good clearance, especially all the way back to all-time highs. For example, if we moved from here back to all-time highs, I mean, that'd be almost a 700% move, which is pretty crazy to think, right? If the stock itself and the bets that people are making on that were to move pretty significantly, I don't think it's out of the question to see something like this GME coin really, really soar on that sort of news. The other thing I want to call to our attention is actually the Fibonacci levels. So if you take the local low and drag it to this local high, what you'll actually see is right in this area, and honestly, we touched it today, is the 618 Fibonacci level, right? So that is a typical retrace after a big move up that you'll see a lot of these coins, a lot of stocks, etc. go into. So now we're looking at kind of 3 levels of confluence, right? You have this support area, you have this 618 Fibonacci level, and then of course you have this downward trend line that we're bouncing off of. So from a risk reward perspective, right, it's obviously fairly heavily off its all-time highs. We're coming into some really good support from multiple different angles. So something that we're really taking a really sharp look at here as we dig into this project. So that's all I got for you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's the ultimate risk reward analysis you got to do for yourself, because we're seeing, a potential 20x if we're talking about all-time highs here, or we're seeing, down 90% if we're talking about the time when we last did our video on GME. And so it's kind of up for you guys. I think it's so news dependent, It'll move with Solana and some of the other meme coins, but if Roaring Kitty comes back and really starts, making noise on Twitter, you could really see this thing move. So, yeah, great analysis.
Yeah, I think it's a good point of it being very news dependent. That's kind of the other edge of this sword with meme coins is, there's not all the on-chain analysis to do. You're not looking at liquidity or liquidity pools. You're not looking at, all these other things. It's basically that this thesis is going to be follow Roaring Kitty, follow the GME stock, and if it's doing well, your bet's going to do well. So, keep the eye on that. Obviously, again, it's risky, but high risk reward in terms of what we're seeing right now. Great job on the charts mod, a great job on the fundamentals there, Zoe. That being said, I think that's all for us today. We are excited to kind of do a year-end review next week, so make sure to tune in next week as well. We're going to cover some of the wins and losses from the year and just a crypto year recap. So stay tuned for that. But with that being said, again, this is not financial advice. Let us know, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know if you're in on GME or if you're taking a look at this seriously. And until next week, WagMe.